So I have the pieces that I need to start creating Pong, but they have no functionality. So we're going to start adding functionality to, to this. I didn't name these paddles before, so I'm going to name them right now. This is left paddle. This is right paddle. And I have my ball. So let's start adding some functionality to the ball. If I click over to the game scene, this is the scene where I can start doing stuff. If I click 2D, it's going to allow me to actually see this, what I put in here. You can work in the space if you want. It doesn't really matter. But the game actually makes it look like Pong. If I click on the game, this is what the camera is seeing. So we're going to add functionality to the ball. And we're going to do this with generic behavior. So we've already downloaded generic behavior. And we are going to get a generic behavior component on this, we're going to go to scripts, and under minimum, we're going to add a generic behavior to this. And you should have went over the generic behavior overview to know what this stuff is already, so we're just going to look at what do we have to do to get this ball to move. We have to add an event first, and so we're going to click down on the events and add a new event. And what type of event do we want for this to happen? So when we're looking at this and we're thinking of this, when do we want the ball to start moving on Pong? And if I had to answer that, I would say, well, the ball starts moving in Pong when the game starts. So on start, I can actually have the ball start moving. So that seems like a good thing to start to pick. So I'm going to pick that on start. And what do I want to happen when the game starts? Is I want it to move. There's a couple things I could do here. I could use motion. That seems like one that would be a smart thing to do. I actually want to just do this once at the beginning instead of adding motion to it. I want to set the velocity of this ball. And from what we learned from rigid bodies, we don't have a rigid body on this ball, so it doesn't actually know about velocity. So I'm going to add a rigid body component to this so that we can start using velocity. So physics, rigid body. And I'm going to move this up just because I want it up there. So this rigid body here, the mass is fine, the drag is fine, and the velocity. I don't want to use gravity on this because in Pong, gravity doesn't act on the ball. I don't want it kinematic. I want to actually move this. I want to put some constraints on it. So the ball, this is a 2D game, and if we look in here, the two dimensions that we're working on are y and x. It can move right and left and up and down. We don't want it to move into the screen, so I want to constrain the position on the z, and I don't want this thing to rotate at all, so I'm going to constrain all these, if it lets me. I'm going to constrain all these positions here. And what do I want to happen when I do this? Well, I want to set something. And I added a rigid body to this, so it has velocity now, so I know I can move it with velocity. So what I would like to set, I made my event was on start. The game action I want is set, and I'm going to pick what I want to set. And there's a lot of things here, but what I want to set is under V. I want to set this as velocity, the velocity of this object. And the velocity I want for it, so remember, we're in 2D, X and Y. We're actually in 3D world, but we want to play this in 2D. So under the vector storage, I want to set the velocity, and I want it to go 1 on the X and 1 on the Y. And that will go diagonal up this way, right? Because we're going X and Y in the positive. And if I do that, the amount, this is how fast I'm going to want it to go. So if I put 5 here, let's see what happens to this ball. So it now just has a generic behavior on it. When the game starts, I'm going to set the velocity at 1, 1 scaled by 5. And hope this works. It works. But 5's a little fast. So why don't we try 2 just so we can see it. That works. So the ball is moving. 2 might even be too fast. We have a moving ball now. So we have put a generic behavior we put a rigid body on the ball. We created it, right? It was just all it was before we had this was it had its transform, its cube mesh, and its collider, so it can interact with the world. And we added a generic behavior to it. And when the game started, we wanted to set the velocity at these values, 1, 1, and have the direction we wanted to go was one. If I is 1 in the y and 1 in the x. If I made one of these negative on the x, -1, it's going to go the other direction. It's still going to go up, but it's going to go left now, right? Because that's the direction I wanted it to go. And if I change this, this changed the speed. So that's how we get the ball to move. Next, we'll be talking about how to get the ball to react.